This is the 33rd episode of the Illegal Use of Hands to the Face Football Podcast. How you doing, Jake?
Doing great, Hayden. How are you?
Tremendous, as per usual. The Denver Broncos are a pretty interesting football team. Would you disagree?
Oh no, they're one to be bewildered at. Just on paper, they look so good, but just they're just one piece away. They're just one piece away.
Yeah, that piece is kind of a big deal too. Okay, so
It's the most important position in football is that one piece that they're away.
So the great part of this is we haven't even said one thing yet to each other about the Denver Broncos. I mean, probably, honestly, the Broncos aren't a hot topic for us too often. So probably in months, and immediately we don't even need to say anything to each other, and we already know that we both are on the exact same, have the exact same perspective on this team. So that's good. So I don't know where we're at. Honestly, I don't even know how many team predictions in we are at this point. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I took the last one, so why don't you do this one?
All right, season notes. Shelby Harris. I gotta say, I took a lot of notes on Shelby Harris. First thing was he got his hand in the passing window, and honestly, he did that a lot this season. He just did a lot of stuff that was really impressive for the Broncos. He's pretty underrated. I mean, just in terms of league wide, and we've heard Brandon Parna say really nice things about him, but that's not really necessarily crazy considering he's a Broncos fan. So that's yeah. But anyways, he really did impress me in all the games that I watched. The first half against the Buccaneers, the Bucs just had a field day against the Broncos defense, and then they kind of showed up in the second half, which was better. Tim Patrick is just very underrated. I mean, this receiving core is something insane. And I'll have another point to come back to that when we talk about guys they drafted. Royce Freeman may have had the worst attempt at pass blocking I've ever seen on one play against the Buccaneers. I mean, he had a guy that he looked like he was about to square up, and then it was like he was programmed by a computer, because it was okay, coach told me to pass block for 2 seconds, so he steps into it, and then right when once he gets through the count of 2 Mississippi, he just steps by and lets whoever's playing quarterback at the time just get absolutely killed. Just lets the guy walk by. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it. Also, Shelby Harris also had a chase down sack at Tom Brady, and then another sack in that same game. It was wild. Then when I watched the New England game, he batted a Cam Newton pass that turned into a pick, which was great. Number 85, the tight end, was doing work against New England. I can't even remember his name, but I just thought it was weird to see how much time he was getting when they have Noah Fant. But that could have been due to injury. I didn't check in on that later in the games. They need creative ways to get KJ Hamler the ball. They spent a high pick on him. They should try to get him the ball a little bit more. That's important, I feel like, for this next season. They did a great job the entire New England game forcing turnovers, but that's kind of expected when you're a Fangio coach team, and honestly, throughout the season, maybe expect a little more turnovers. Justin Simmons opens the Chargers game with an interception. He's probably their best defensive back, and before I would have said by a mile, but honestly I was pretty impressed with Kareem Jackson as well by the time I got through all these games. The D-line just in general was very impressive. Jerry Jeudy's too quiet early in the season. At the end of the season, I think he may have started to come on a little more, but just he was too quiet last season for what he was. In the Chargers at Broncos game, there was way too many turnovers. The entire game was just disgusting with how many turnovers were total. The Deshaun Hamilton thing that happened this past week, if you were paying any attention to that, it's the second player that they've had get injured away from the facility and now not be owed any money by the team because they're skipping the workouts that they could be at the same time. Not even getting injured when there's no option to be at the facility. Just when they could be at the facility, getting injured away. And the second player the Broncos have lost just because they have to cut him. because it voids their contract, and it's probably the right thing to do as a team. It's just, geez, guys, I mean, sometimes it's worth it to show up and see your teammates who you're supposed to try to build a relationship with. I don't know. You can say whatever you want, but it just with how the rules are built now, there is no way that any player can say that they should be working out away from the facility when they have the option to work out at the facility. The comeback they had against the Chargers would be a lot more impressive if Anthony Lynn wasn't the coach for the other team. On the offensive side of the ball, it really feels like all the issues come back to the quarterback. Kareem Jackson, like I said before, kind of showed out. I was surprised by how well he was playing now going into his age 33 season. And I would say kind of before I would have said something like, well, he's getting up there in age. But I mean, geez, if you can do it at 32, I don't know how much of a difference 33 is, because I would already say 32 is pretty old. Then I think Judy started figuring it out at the end of this season. That's what I got for notes before statistics.
Yeah, I'll just pick up right where you left off with Judy. Something that I noticed all season when I would, I had Game Pass, so I was watching a bunch of games at once, and the Broncos were always a game that was on when the Bills weren't playing. So I'd flip that on or have that up in the array, and I would just see Jerry Jeudy get so wide open. He's such a nasty route runner, but the dude could not catch anything last season. He could not catch a cold. I think he had like a 55 or 56 catch percentage.
No, nope, I've got it here if you want me to say it right now.
Yeah, sure.
46.
Sure.
Not even 46. 50. So, not even 50. 46 catch percentage.
Yeah, that's just atrocious and unacceptable, especially for how high of a pick he is. I mean, could he have better people throwing balls to him? Definitely. But when you're such a highly touted receiver like he was, you're kind of expected to grab anything that's in your vicinity. And it's just rough to watch some tape on him with how open he gets, with how nasty and fast he is, and just nothing. Drew Lock is an anomaly. It is so weird. Last season, 2019, I was like, oh geez, the Broncos actually got a franchise guy, wins 4 of 5, and comes off the bench after Flacco's like, yo, I'm going to compete with him and all that. I was like, great, good to see Drew Lock do that. And wins 4 games again, but did that in 13 starts now, and he did not look impressive at all. And I mean, that's something that you kind of have to look for players to have these jumps. Comparing it to Josh Allen's ridiculous because no one's going to have a jump like him, but you want to see steady progression over the course of a career or the first couple years, and it seems like Drew Lock took a step back.
The only argument I could see here for talking about Drew Lock is the fact that you could say with how many games he started in total. So you said 13 this year and 5 last season. That's 18. He's barely passed 1 full season of starts. And I think a lot of people usually say that after 1 season, year 2 is where you're supposed to explode. And I don't know where that metric is built off. That's just what I've heard a lot of people say before. And if you want to use that, I guess you have an argument there. But even though it hasn't been 32 games worth of reps, he's been in the building for at least 32, live preparations of games and practices and whatnot.
31 because he got COVID and they had to play Kendall Hinton.
Yeah, but I mean, you think he was completely out of the game plan? You don't. That's the key.
No, I know.
And I know, injury obviously too. But just he's been there for the preparation, and I mean, you talk about other guys you want to talk about an amazing year 2 jump for a guy that barely had any experience in his first year. Ready for this one? It's crazy. That guy named Patrick Mahomes. That's kind of the best quarterback in the league. He played 1 game his rookie year and then came in and set the league on fire. I really wonder what it would have been like to see him in his rookie year, but I mean, take him as an example. I think just being in the building for at least 1 season is the real key to get an idea under your belt of what's going on, not actually the number of games you play. and I think that's more of what I subscribe to. So if he still looks bad after this season, I would have been looking to move on at quarterback much earlier than what it seems to be now, where they're kind of considering trading for a guy. But I mean, it really leaves a lot of room up in the air. And I'll let you continue in a second, but I do have just one fun note on Drew Lock. Drew Lock, 57% completion percentage, which is not good for the NFL at all. 16 touchdowns to 15 picks. That's also not very good at all.
Yeah, yeah. But watching him, like, he has some throws that just make you go, wow. He's like, you could see it, but then there's just other plays where you're shaking your head on some of the decisions he makes. Especially, he seems a little trigger happy at times, which, I mean, go for it. I mean, I like quarterbacks that are like that, but he seems also like giddy to his feet are pretty giddy in the pocket from what I saw too, especially when he throws interceptions. He's just really like, I need to get out of here, which I kind of understand with their offensive line, which is not the best, but it's not terrible either, where they're like, they don't have 5 Royce Freemans up there blocking. So he doesn't have to worry about getting killed every single time. But I can understand his giddiness, but that's something that the team as a whole needs to work on. Moving on from him, to not spend an hour talking about Drew Lock. Yeah, the Saints game was atrocious. I don't even know why I wrote that down. That's just very obvious. I already talked about Judy. No, I didn't watch it back.
Oh my gosh, I was going to say, what did you do?
Happened. No, I watched it when it happened. That's the thing. I was really excited when the news got out. I was like, we're going to see 2 guys that should not be playing quarterback. That's awesome. But watched that, or didn't rewatch it. When I did rewatch, Fangio's D is just amazing. Like, he is such a great defensive coach. It is insane to see the talent that he has developed and the talent that was already there that he's getting the most out of, especially in Justin Simmons, because that dude is like probably the biggest star on that team after Von Miller. Yeah, it's insane. And then you asked me this before we started recording, but who my favorite Bronco is now. It's Malik Reed. I really like Malik Reed. I really liked what I saw from him when I watched these games back. I knew very little about him, and watched these back. It's like, dude, oh man, I love him.
He didn't really. I mean, this is the other thing about only taking a sample of the season when we go back to look at these teams. He didn't really jump out at me in any of the games I watched. And the other thing that sucks about him, even though you really like him, is that he's going to become a rotation guy this season.
Oh yeah, I could kind of see that. But he led them in, like, I think he led the team in sacks, and he also no, I think just sacks, maybe tackles. I don't think tackles though. But he led the team in sacks, which was surprising when I looked at the stats after watching the games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Malik Reed, and it sucks that he's probably going to get buried in that amazing depth of defense that they have.
Yeah. One thing I skipped over about Drew Lock that I wrote down, and I don't know, I must have accidentally skipped over it. Just one note. The one ball that I love that he throws is, I love his fade ball. I feel like his fade ball is like,
oh yes,
on the money, like 80% of the time. Sometimes he overshoots it, but a lot of the time it's a really good looking ball. So stats for me. Okay, this is my favorite stat from the Broncos last season. How many games did Kendall Hinton start?
0.
Phillip Lindsay, starting quarterback. Love that. Of the top 3 running backs last season, Lindsay had the worst yards per carry, so honestly, maybe good moving on from him. The Broncos did pretty well running the ball, though. All those guys, talking about yards per carry, the Broncos had all 3 of those top 3 guys were averaging over 4 yards per carry. And then there was another team we were talking about the other day, I can't remember who it was, that I was thinking was pretty decent running the ball, and then I found out that none of their running backs were at 4 yards per carry. So that 4 yards per carry mark is a pretty good mark, I think, because if you talk about whole numbers, 3 yards per carry on 3 attempts is not a first down. 4 yards per carry on 3 attempts is a first down. So I think that's a pretty good mark to try to make a goal for when you're running the ball, to hit that mark or above it. Noah Fant led the team in receptions at 62. I was kind of surprised by this because, once again, I maybe just took a really weird sample of games, but Fant and Reed didn't really show up to me that hugely in the games I watched, but obviously on the stat sheet they look pretty good. Jerry Jeudy also had the most yards on the team with 856. Tim Patrick led in receiving touchdowns at 6. I already mentioned the 46% catch percentage for Jeudy, which is just atrocious. Deontay Spencer did fairly well in the punt return department, but not the kick return department, which was kind of weird. Usually when a guy's successful in one, he can do fairly decently in the other. Honestly, for Spencer, it was extremely different. Like, he was solid in the punt return game and then almost like terrible in terms of stats in the kick return game. McManus, as compared to some of the other guys we looked at, his percentage isn't much higher than some of the other guys that I said were questionable kickers. The thing about McManus is that he had so many 50-plus yard attempts. He missed 7 kicks this season, and 6 of them were from 50-plus. So, honestly, not too much hate there. I think McManus is still a plenty good kicker. Alexander Johnson, 124 tackles with Josie Jewell doing 113. Those guys on the interior play pretty well. They're not like crazy interesting players for any other reasons, but they do their job well. So they both got 100-plus tackles. The two safeties in Jackson and Simmons weren't far behind, almost both. They were both 89-plus, nearing 100. 9 passes defended for Justin Simmons, and second on the team in passes defended was Shelby Harris with 7. Simmons also got 5 interceptions. And then somehow, some way, I didn't think that the corners for this team would lead any statistics at all. But Michael Ojemudia, he forced 4 fumbles on this season. That just seemed random. I don't think that's repeatable at all, and I don't think he'll be seeing the time on the field for that to be repeatable anyways. And as you said, Malik Reed led the team with 8 sacks, 7.5 for Bradley Chubb, and those two also had the most tackles for loss on the team. You have to think adding back Von Miller makes them excited on defense. And that's
yeah. I don't have anything much stat-wise that you didn't already cover besides the one thing I took a note of that was very drastic was Deontay Spencer's return numbers, because it is insane, the disparity between punt yards and kickoffs. It is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, you just wouldn't see or don't expect that kind of disparity between the two.
Yeah. I also like their free agency. They really kept it simple in free agency.
Yes.
and trades. We can even throw Teddy Bridgewater in there because it's not a long list in terms of guys that they added, and it's not a long list in terms of guys they lost either. So go ahead.
Free agency. First, there's a better corner that they added in free agency, but I just have to say this because I called it. Ronald Darby to the Broncos. I called that months ago before it happened. You know, it's a gift. It's just tough to be like this. But Darby, Kyle Fuller, 2 solid corners that they brought in, and then besides Teddy, who was brought in on a trade, I had Mike Boone there, who's a good special teamer and might help Deontay Spencer get some kick return or kickoff return yards, because that's where Mike Boone does well in his special teams, but he's also a decent running back as well.
Okay. I really hadn't thought about Mike Boone on special teams at all. I just kind of always thought Mike Boone was just kind of like held back in Minnesota because he was behind the other 2 guys that were going to stay in front of him no matter what. So I thought he was a good signing at the running back position. That's a good replacement. I think Teddy Bridgewater's interesting, but geez, we're trying to solve the problem here, not just like push it away. I don't know. What are we about to run a 2-quarterback system? Is it about to be like, oh, it's first down, Teddy, you're in. Oh shoot, it's 3rd and 12. Drew Lock, you're like, what's the system going to be here? Because it's like, well, we can either choose one of the most dink and dunk passers in the league, or we could choose a kid who really likes to throw the ball down the field, but is sometimes overly aggressive in when he goes down the field. So That's interesting. Do really like Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby, except for the fact that I don't understand the cornerback market for how much you pay for these players. I like adding both of them, but I don't understand how we get the value for either of them. And then I also added, they got Cam Fleming. I mentioned him
No.
just because I did think that I think their tackle position is honestly, like, I just talk in terms of like edge O linemen and interior O linemen. So like centers and guards kind of overlap for me. And I just feel like their tackles are weaker than their interior OL. So I thought that was important to mention.
Yeah. Moving on to their losses. I mean, like you said, they did not lose much. They spent a lot of their free agent money retaining guys, but they brought in the guys we mentioned,
Like
and
Kareem
their
Jackson,
big,
which was good.
yes. But their bigger losses of the offseason, I'd say, would be Philip Lindsay, which you said he wasn't even producing that well. So not that big of a loss. AJ Boye, who is corner depth for them, but they addressed that in free agency. Will Parks, who I put on here because Brandon Perna just loves to praise him when he did recaps, so had to toss him on there. And DeMarcus Walker.
Okay, I got two different. I have four as well, but two different ones from you. I got Jeff Driscoll on here and Jeremiah Atuachu. Atachu. I think it's Atachu. But Atachu hasn't really done much in recent years. And then I think Driscoll's just a solid backup QB. So I'll put him on there. But he's getting replaced by Bridgewater, so that doesn't really much matter. And obviously with Lindsey, I think Mike Boone is a plenty good replacement. And I think AJ Boye adding Darby and Fuller is also a plenty good replacement. So in terms of free agency, I think they got better because they actually upgraded. If they lost anybody in free agency, they upgraded the position and got better. And I mean, they didn't even lose a tackle, and they had Cam Fleming. So the thing is that we're still going to keep running back to this quarterback concept for this entire time we're talking about this team, and we're still not sold on it. So, yeah, that's still the issue. Okay.
Well, I was just going to go over a couple of guys that haven't been signed yet as well to include them in their losses, even though they could be coming back. Devontae Bosby, who just more corner depth, but they addressed that, so I don't think they'll be bringing him back. Drell Casey has not been signed by them. I don't know if he will be because this price tag may be a little too high. Had to include Jake Butt just because of the name. And Anthony Chiquillo, a good special teamer that they're letting walk, which is surprising after, seeing the lack of production from special teams.
What round was Jake Butt picked in? I feel like he was actually like a high pick.
4th, I think.
Which is like, I don't know. It's right in the middle, but
I know he had an injury
anything.
Coming out of college. So, yeah. Well, and their tight end room, they've just have stacked their tight end room over the past couple seasons.
If you know, who is the guy that I said earlier is number 85, I think.
Albert O. Albert Oja. I can't say. I can't pronounce it.
No, because that's it's not because that's Michael.
Yeah, I know it's not. I know the announcers would just call him Albert O because they couldn't his last name's really long.
Okay, well, yeah, he was pretty good when I saw him. You want me to go first for the draft as well?
Sure, take it away.
Okay. This team doesn't have any positions that are too needy, which is weird. They kind of can just go for depth at whatever position they feel like they don't have enough depth at, which is wild. But realistically, the first thing they should have focused on in the draft was a quarterback. And we obviously just skipped out on that because we're praying that we get a trade to go through this offseason. And it's so funny that this is what we're relying on. I mean, it just seems like so weird to put the fate of your team into other people's hands based off whether or not they will accept a trade in the future. I don't think that's a good idea at all, Broncos, but that's what you chose to do here. And it's just such a weird position to be in. If you can do something yourself to fix a problem yourself, this is just in terms of everything, or you can leave it up to somebody else, Why would you put it into somebody else's hands? That doesn't make any sense. I can't imagine they were sitting there at 9 and being like, we hate Justin Fields and we hate Mac Jones, like both of them, just absolutely despise them, like they're no good. And even then, later in the draft, they have other high picks, like second rounders they could have used on a half decent quarterback or something, but instead just, no, we're just disregarding it. So sorry, I'm just getting that out of the way before I even talk about the draft.
I can see their thinking for that kind of. I don't completely agree with it, but it's like we either get Aaron Rodgers, which that's huge. You get Aaron Rodgers, or we have another crappy season, and then we're back in the top 10 to get a quarterback in that draft, or give that pick up for Aaron Rodgers. So I guess that'd be the way they're looking at it. I don't know. Elway's not the GM anymore, so I can't blame him.
But we just talked about how like solid this team is at every other position.
Yes.
So how are you going to be bad enough to guarantee that you can get a quarterback in a draft class where you never know until it's actually time to draft where you think all those quarterbacks or how highly you think of all those quarterbacks? Got a whole year before we know how this next QB class is going to fall out. And what if there's only one or two guys at the top? I mean, in recent years, we love pushing more guys up the board just because we love quarterbacks so much in the NFL. But, I mean, that's a pretty bad thing to do because if there's only one guy up there, this team is not good enough. Sorry, not bad enough to get the number 1 pick because every other position is solid. And they're definitely not going to be bad enough with Teddy Bridgewater. You can't lose nearly enough. If Teddy Bridgewater's your QB, you can be the worst team in the league and you're guaranteed to not have the number 1 pick because Bridgewater's going to be safe, relatively safe with the football, I would think. And I trust him most of the time, and that's a problem. There is the potential that they could be like, oh, next year we'll get a QB, and then there's just like they're picking too late and they can't even get a QB they want.
Yeah, but I do agree with you that you shouldn't put the future of your organization in another team's hands for them to like take care of you, which is what the Broncos did. But if there had to be an explanation, it's just that they think the potential of Aaron Rodgers outweighs the like near future of their team, and that has to be like the only explanation for it.
I get what you mean. I
don't agree with it either, but that has to be their line of thinking. If it's not, and they just think, oh well, we saw what Drew Lock did for us in like one full season that he's had so far, let's try to run it back.
You're probably right. It's probably not about any of the other guys that it could be a trade for at all either. It's not about Watson or Garoppolo or anyone else that you could potentially say is a quarterback trade candidate, because the only guy who would be upset that somebody's on his behind at the quarterback position would be Aaron Rodgers, because that's the exact reason that he wants to get out of Green Bay right now. Yeah. But I mean, geez, if you're going to put that much into it, the one last thing I'll say on this is that if you're going to put that much stock into it, just get it done before the draft even happens, or like during the draft. Don't just be like, oh, it came out on draft day, so now it came out on draft day that Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to be a Packer anymore, so now we're going to be clear that we are not going to take a QB in this draft. That's not right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of stupid to be playing cat and mouse with the Packers for that. Just if you want Aaron Rodgers, give up a package that they cannot refuse and get him.
Yeah, because even if they gave up like a few players, like I said, they don't have, like, after this free agency period, besides the quarterback position, there was like no real holes on this roster, like significant holes. So with that said, you're going to give up a significant package for Aaron Rodgers, but you're still going to have ammunition in the draft. You're not going to give up your whole draft class to do it, because no team ever does that. If they want to give up something big, they give up picks over multiple years. They don't give up a whole draft class, which honestly, sometimes I would be in favor of giving up a whole draft class over just multiple picks. But, I mean, they're still going to have ammo this year. So even if they had to give up like 2 players along with some picks, they would have had ammo to fill those guys back in. But that wasn't the decision they made. So let's leave it at that. Yeah. Patrick Surtain II feels like a can't miss DB candidate, and since they have mostly aged guys in the defensive backfield, I'd say it probably makes sense to grab somebody who's got some young blood to him, because I mean he is solid, and just so that they have at least one guy back there that they won't be needing to replace in the near future. Javonte Williams, I said this before, I'm still not in love with him. Well, I said it to you. I don't know if I actually said it on a pod. I'm still not in love with Javonte Williams, but I saw a few things that make me like him slightly more than how much I basically said I despised him before. I saw some more film, which honestly I didn't think I had seen, and it made him look better. I was just surprised why it wasn't where I had initially looked. But honestly, running back, I don't know if that's where I would have went. But as I said, basically every position they're going after here is depth, and it's not addressing. Basically, none of these guys need to be immediate starters, no matter where they were picked. So it's kind of hard to kill them on any of these picks. Quinn Miners, or Miners, however you say it, a great player in the middle offensive line. He has a nice belly, and I would have thought they needed more tackles than interior O-linemen, but once again, can't knock it. So I'll stop saying that I can't knock him for anything. You get the idea. It's basically all depth stuff. Next guy, Brandon Browning, great open field tackler. That's what I got for him. Cadence Stearns does a little bit of everything, and he made some plays on special teams, which is where I'll most likely play initially for the Broncos, so that's a good thing. Jamar Johnson, basically just a ball hawk and a good blitzer. He's also a safety, so I mean you would expect him to play on special teams as well, but didn't see as much of the special team stuff. But I guess you could kind of say that some of the blitz angles and stuff, the way you have to tackle guys just moving fast and making open field tackles, can kind of translate. So he may be decent on special teams as well. And then this next pick is just the unnecessary pick that every team seems to need to do, because no matter how good your wide receivers are, an NFL team is not allowed to get through the NFL draft without selecting another wide receiver, which is just ridiculous. Seth Williams is a jump ball threat style receiver, and they have Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick, who are both 6'4". Seth Williams is only 6'3", and definitely not at this time as talented as those guys. But like I said, it's just because every team needs to draft a receiver for some reason. Carrie Vincent Jr. is an exciting defensive back who looks like he may have fallen because he didn't play in 2020. He was from LSU. Kind of interested in him. A lot of weird late round picks. Just in terms of every team we've talked about, like guys that we've just been like, okay, why the heck is he even drafted? That's like our favorite one is our Bengals defensive tackle that I can't remember the name of from LSU. And then this guy, this guy feels like, just based off like a small sample size, feel like he fell exclusively because of the fact that he didn't play this year. Yet Jamar Chase is still a top 5 wide receiver in the draft, and he didn't play this year. So it's kind of weird how teams interpret that type of thing. Jonathan Cooper, he did really well. I don't know why he fell so much. He was Ohio State, I'm pretty sure. And then Marquise Spencer, athletic, strong. Like that they added one edge player right before him, and then they added one interior defensive lineman right after that. I'll just say my UDFA things really quick. They added 11 undrafted free agents. One of them was a fullback. That's all I got.
That's all I need to say. Yeah. My analysis for the draft, I've moved away in the previous episodes of putting my rankings that I had going into the draft, including out this guy. So I went back and did it for this one because the Broncos had a substantial amount of guys that we actually watched, or I actually watched because we, went off different lists. But Pat Surtain, he's really good. I mean, he, number 4 corner for me, but he was like consensus 1 for everyone else. So, I mean, like you and I both agreed that the corners are just all so close.
Yeah. He wasn't number 1 for me either, but I mean, just the fact I mean, just we recognize that just the fact that he's from Alabama, like there's no way the competition was crappy he was going up against every week. So it's like you can't doubt it.
Yeah, and with all the vets that they have at that position and in that room, to bring in a guy as good as him that already has the traits and has played against great competition already, to have him be able to be with guys that are really, really good and learn from them and not automatically be thrusted into that number one role, it's going to help him even more, not just with confidence, or not just with developing, but with his confidence too. Javonte Williams, you and I were both really low on him. I know you said you've gotten higher on him. He was the number 6 running back for me.
Well, he's just I should clear this up. He just went from being terrible to being mediocre for me. Because I was really hating on him before, and I just want to say that I'm not gonna hate him as much. I'm still not putting him upper tier, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah. He just doesn't do a lot of impressive stuff. I mean, if he can have one game a year, that's like the Miami game, the Broncos are going to win one game this season for sure, and he's gonna have 300 rushing yards, and it's gonna be insane. But just very, very weird. Quinn Miners is my guy. I told you about him. I ranked him. He was my number 1 interior offensive lineman, and you said you didn't even watch him. Dude's an animal. He dominated, I think he played D3. He dominated D3 competition, which if you're going to be drafted and play at a D3 school, you need to obliterate that competition, which he did. But again, I was weird looking at that Broncos team because this draft is entirely for depth, which is weird for a team drafting at 10. They were lacking more at tackle than they were anywhere in the interior of their line. So I would have liked to see a tackle go some point in this draft. But if they were dead set on we're only going to draft one offensive lineman this whole draft, and it's going to be at our first 3rd round pick, and it's just going to be the best guy there, then they definitely did that. Baron Browning, dude just lights people up. He was my number 4 linebacker when we ranked him. He just goes out there with a mission to take heads off, and I would love to see what Fangio does with him in that defense. Just any defensive player that I liked a lot when I watched him, going to Fangio's defense is going to be awesome. Though he may get mixed up or muddled in that rotation that he has, just dude is going to have an opportunity to put up numbers, or at least highlights. Cadence Stearns is another defensive guy that I had ranked high. He was my number 5 safety. He just is a playmaker. He's a ball hawk, does everything, plays on special teams, which, like you said, is going to be a big role of what he does now for the Broncos. It's going to be fun, and he's going to be able to learn behind 2 of the better safeties in the game. In Denver, and one of the better, if not the best defensive coach. Jamar Johnson, I wasn't too impressed with him. I did rank him, though. He was my number 19 safety out of 20 that I watched. He's going to be another special teams guy. I mean, they just really loaded up on secondary guys in this draft and in free agency, too. So if that's, which, I mean, I don't blame them, because if you go back and look at games later in the season, their injury report, it's like all their corners are just hurt. And especially that Bills game, they had like linebackers out wide, like covering receivers and stuff. It was insane.
Yeah, you're right. But I mean, it didn't even matter that the corners were hurt, because even the corners that were hurt, like, yeah, they weren't good. They just weren't good either. It made it even worse. It made it even worse that there were so many guys that were injured, but they weren't good either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it killed them. So if they just think we're going to load up on this and not have to worry about that problem, I can't be mad at that. Seth Williams, I mean, I thought of you when I was looking at their draft, like, there's the receiver that every team needs to draft. And watching him, it's like, they drafted Cortland Sutton, or they have Cortland Sutton. Why did you draft this guy? He talks a lot of trash, so that's good. Nice to have a guy like that on your team. It's funny just seeing him talk all that trash and then going out and mossing guys. So, I mean, more competition for the position. He's going to push some guys. Maybe he could be like a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and just get into fistfights with dudes at practice. Every successful team needs one of them.
Just get other people to punch you.
Yeah.
My goal is to have the opponent punch me first.
Yeah. I want you to break your hand I want you to get so mad you punch my helmet.
I'll take one in the face mask. I'm not scared.
Yeah. Carrie Vincent, yeah, he's a ball hawk. I mean, he's a good young player to develop, and that's what I can say for all three of these last guys. They're very raw, and they all went to big schools, which is weird because the other teams we've looked at, the shots that they've taken in the late round, these don't look like shots either. These look like guys that have like really good tape on them, went to good schools, played against good competition. And they're like, oh, they fell? All right, let's just take all these defensive guys and have Fangio have his way with this Play-Doh that we got him. And the last note, look, I don't have much to say about Jonathan Cooper or Marquise Spencer because it's all the same for those two guys and Carrie Vincent. They're just very raw defensive players so that Fangio can have a ball with trying to develop. My last note on that whole draft class is didn't draft a lot of small school guys at all, but they drafted the smallest school guy in the whole draft in Quinn Miners. Yeah. And everyone else went to a big school, which I thought was funny.
Yeah, it's been so weird. So I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, in terms of draft picks, they were 9th. So they're the 9th team we've discussed so far. It's really weird. Every single draft class we've talked about, I feel like this is one of them where I would say this is minus like the Seth Williams pick, because you're just obligated no matter how good your draft class is to take a wide receiver.
Yeah, it's in the rule book.
Yeah, it just feels like we've either said like really good draft class or really bad. And the thing that's funny is like I would say this one classifies more as the really good, but like the really bad ones, they've even had like some good players, but it's like best examples are like the Lions and the Bengals with Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase. They're taking great players, and they're just taking great players at positions they don't need at all.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it doesn't feel like anybody's completely failed at the draft yet. Everybody's gotten either good players or positions of need. But the thing that's different is that we've got some teams taking good players and at places they make sense, and other teams taking not even necessarily good players, but more often than not good players, and then just taking them for places they don't need at all. While they've got some guy who should be like a 4th string defensive tackle, and they're picking safeties instead. Just that type of crap. But the Broncos did well, so shouldn't complain about that. You ready to get into the schedule?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so their over-under is 7.5 wins. Before we start, I think their over-under is slightly boosted, just slightly, maybe like a game and a half, probably just one game, by the fact that people are like feeling that they could have a trade at the quarterback position. So they haven't like boosted it like the trade has happened. Like if the trade actually goes through and they get a quarterback, this over-under is going to jump like 4 whole games. But just a little bit of a hedge against it. Maybe their over-under is boosted by like 1 game from like 6.5 to 7.5. But they're at 7.5 right now, so that's what we got to base it off of. Okay, week 1 at New York Giants. I don't like the Giants. W. Week 2 at Jacksonville. Jacksonville is an interesting team. They're kind of similar in the fact that I don't really feel like either team has too many holes at all. But Jacksonville has a better quarterback. But the thing is that overall, I still think the whole roster of Denver is better than Jacksonville. So toss up there, kind of balance it out. They play the Jets at home week 3. I think that's a pretty easy W. I don't think the Jets are going to be good either. I think both New York teams are going to be bad, which I feel like every team we've talked about so far has had both New York teams on their schedule somehow, and I've just been trashing both the New York teams. So maybe we should get around to the Giants episode finally. But yeah. Then Baltimore. Baltimore's a really good team. L there. At Pittsburgh. I'm feeling weird about Pittsburgh, which I feel like I've said before. I'm giving that a toss-up for Denver. I really am not feeling too confident in Pittsburgh. And then they play the Raiders. They got the Raiders at home when they play them twice. So this first home game I got as a toss-up game for them. Feel like that one could swing either way. Then they go to Cleveland. I think Cleveland is an L. Washington, an L. Dallas, an L. I feel like all three of those teams have something that gives them a significant advantage over Denver at the time being. Then they've got Philadelphia at home. I think that's a W for them. I think they're by far a better roster than Philadelphia, and it's not like either team has a huge advantage in the quarterback department at this point in time unless we see somebody come on majorly. So I'll give the dub to them because I think the roster is much better. Then they play the Chargers. I think they kind of drew an unlucky one here in the fact that they've got the Chargers twice, like later in the second half of the schedule. This is the first time they play the Chargers, and they don't play them until week 12. That's pretty crappy. I think that makes it an L for them because I feel like the Chargers are going to know themselves pretty well by them. And I mean, geez, that quarterback of theirs is looking like he's going to be something special in the future. So that's not, and you don't really want to give him more time to develop. Then at Kansas City, we know about them. That's an L. They've got Detroit at home actually, so that's a W. Then they've got Cincinnati at home. Once again, this is a matchup where it's kind of the opposite of them. It's the Bengals have a decent roster, but they have a decent number of holes as well. The thing is they've got the one position figured out that the Broncos don't, which is the quarterback. So I'm not feeling too aggressive in giving them the W there. So that's just a toss-up. Could go either way. But they've got him at home, so maybe they got the advantage there. And then the last 3 weeks of the season, they finish out with three division games, and this time they're at Las Vegas, so I gave them the toss-up earlier against Vegas. I don't think it is this time. I think it's an L going there. Then the Chargers, I still think the Chargers late in the season, they'll have everything going the right way. That's another L. And Kansas City is an L as well in the last week of the season. The one thing that you could say about Kansas City last week of the season is that the game may not potentially matter, and Kansas City may just be sitting people. That could give them an opportunity to win an extra game that they weren't expecting to. The only thing I'm kind of sad about here with the schedule that I'll say really quickly is that I feel like I thought they played the Raiders the last 2 years, the last week of the season, and both those games were really exciting games, even though neither of them mattered. So it's like those were nice last week of the season matchups because they were fun. But that gives me a 6-11 record for them. I think the QB issue holds them back. But if they have a new QB by the regular season, that changes a lot. And I also think that is why they have a boost up to 7.5 wins, because they could acquire a QB instead of something like 6.5. So 6-11 for me for the time being.
Yeah, for the time being is the key word here for my decision. So this is why every one of my choices is going to change by the time the season starts, because
so you're guaranteeing the trade goes through?
No, well, they might change. I mean, I'm going to change them either way after more time we see camp stuff and everything. But going through the Broncos schedule, week 1 at the Giants, I'm not very high on the Giants. That's going to be a win. At Jacksonville, I mean, they're bringing back the same exact team, and it's just so tough for them. Like, if Drew Lock is their quarterback, I just think if a team has a better quarterback than them, they're just going to win it. It doesn't matter how good that defense is. So that's going to be an L against Jacksonville. Home opener against the Jets, I think that's going to be an L too. They just, it's tough. Even though Zach Wilson and Drew Lock are kind of, Zach Wilson's first round Drew Lock.
I gotta say, I was not expecting you to hand them that L. And if you're handing them that L, I feel like you're about to say like 2-15. So keep going.
Home against Baltimore, that's an L. At Pittsburgh, that's an L. Home against Vegas, that's a dub. Vegas is just garbage. Like, their offseason moves have been mind-boggling for them, or for me. Just, I don't get it.
Can't wait to talk about him then.
Yeah. At Cleveland, that's going to be an L. Home against Washington, I think they come out with a win with this one because Drew Lock is going to be the better quarterback. Both the teams have good defenses. I just think the Broncos put up more points. Okay, you're standing in disbelief.
You think when
that's an L.
Taylor Heineke guaranteed
He's not going to be the starting quarterback. He's not going to be the starting quarterback.
Okay, fine. But if they put Heineke in, what's the final score of that game? If Heineke's the starting quarterback.
When I make week-by-week choices, if Heineke finally gets in, that's an immediate dub for the football team. But if it's Fitzmagic there, Fitzmagic left the chance at just as much as Drew Lock. So I think if both of them throw 3 picks, Drew Lock has a better chance of getting the dub there, especially with Seth Williams. He's fade God. Just toss it up to Seth Williams. Oh, man. At Dallas, that's an L. Philly, in the Philly episode, I said Philly gets a win here because I think Philly gets out of their bye the week before this game, so they get extra preparation. I'm just going to give Philly the dub here, L to the Broncos. Bye week happens, and then looking at the schedule, I laughed to myself because, geez, do the schedule makers hate the Broncos with giving them the Chargers and Kansas City twice after their bye week. And this tail end of the season, it's stupid. So that's an L against the Chargers, L against KC, dub against Detroit, L against Cincinnati because Cincinnati has a quarterback, and Joe Burrow makes very decisive decisions. So it's going to be hard for the defense to take advantage of him. Well, they could take advantage of the offensive line. So, but that's an L against Cincinnati. At Vegas, that's going to be another dub for the Broncos. I'm not a big fan of Vegas. I'm not a big fan of what they did. And then rounding out the schedule, got 2 L's there at the Chargers and home against KC, giving them a final record of 5-12.
Okay, that's a 1-game difference. That's not too bad. Pretty similar. Yeah. But we're both going under then. Unless the QB situation changes.
I'm going to heavily go under with that. I'm pretty confident the under.
I'm heavily going under until I have to cover my bet because Aaron Rodgers is on the team.
Yeah. For now, I'm not putting any money in now, but
the week the season starts.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Okay. The one saving grace is that they did give them like 2 terrible teams in Cincinnati and Detroit at the end of the season. It was nothing like that final 4-game stretch we saw for who was it? Carolina, who had like the just awful final 4-game stretch where they had...
Carolina has the Bills, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Tampa Bay.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous. That's a mess. Also, one quick thing here before we get going. I have never heard anybody use the phrase decisive decisions. Can you please explain what Joe Burrow is doing when he's making decisive decisions?
He doesn't force a lot of throws. He makes the right play. He throws a good ball. Drew Lock does not make decisive decisions. Drew Lock closes. Did you not see the one quote that was going around last season where he's like, "Yeah, once I throw the ball, I don't know where it's going." That was an actual Drew Lock quote.
That's an accuracy. That's an accuracy thing, though. That's not a. That's not a decisive decision.
If you know every time the ball leaves your hand, you have no idea where it's going.
Yeah, you're probably right. To be fair,
it's a lot of mental stuff. Drew Lock has a lot of music lyrics saved up in his brain.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow has route concepts.
I just think we could have went with like he I don't know, he reads the defense quicker or more effectively. I don't know, decisive decisions just sounds a little funny.
You don't get the alliteration. You don't get the alliteration with that though.
You're right, and I was
decisions.
Really thinking about alliteration last night and how important it was. But that's a side note. Y'all set?
Man. Well, first, Brandon Perna, please have us on your podcast if you're watching this. But yes, I think we can cut it here.